Hey, a quick note about this podcast you're about to hear is from one of our summits. Now, I know you couldn't make it, but that's all right. We think it's good stuff and we wanted to share it. Hope you enjoy.
Today we have Arielle joining us. She is awesome, one of my favorites. She works with us, another health coach that works with us at Wild Health. And aside from health coaching, she's also a nutritional therapy practitioner. Um, Arielle, maybe you could speak to this a little bit, but you were kind of prompted to move into this direction based on some of your own health issues and really learned the importance of food and regenerative farming, food sourcing, and I think that's maybe what led you into that path and what you're going to be talking with us a little bit about today.
Yeah, so I would say probably the last thing I thought would come out of me trying to feel better was owning my own ranch and raising my own animals, truthfully. But the kind of impetus was the fact that I had a ton of autoimmune issues and I was having a lot of digestive issues that nobody could give me an answer for. And the more that I learned and the more that I kind of dove into the world of nutrition and understanding, all of the things that affect your digestive system and all these different things, it just was more apparent to me that quality of food matters so much. And then completely kind of outside of that realm, like as I started to feel better, I started to really think about other things in my life that maybe weren't working for me. And a big part of that was I felt really stifled and really overwhelmed in cities. So I started, thinking about where I wanted to live and things like that. And it kind of evolved into wanting to own a ranch. But that was way later down the road. And so this is more going to be a talk about why regenerative farming can be so powerful, but it's by no means trying to convince anybody that they should also move onto a farm and raise their own animals, because I don't know that that's necessarily the answer. I don't know that that's feasible for everybody. And I don't know that that's really what everybody wants to do, and that's okay. But hopefully I can share some fun stories and some cool information.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to it. You can go ahead and get started. I'm going to be here to monitor chat for you during, and I may pop in here and there if there's some questions that are pertinent to that topic at that time instead of waiting till the end, if that's cool with you.
That is perfect. That sounds great. So I'm going to present this. It seems very serious, but I promise it's not that serious. Okay. So today we're talking about regenerative agriculture and really just the case for better nutrition. First, a little bit about me. This is one of our dairy cows. My name's Arielle, like we talked about already. I'm a health coach for Wild Health. I'm also a functional nutrition coach and nutritional therapy practitioner and a first generation regenerative rancher. And when I say first generation, I literally mean the first time I ever touched a cow, or the only other time I've ever touched a farm animal, was on a field trip in third grade. I literally touched a cow, and that was the extent of my experience on farms before diving into this world. We live currently in Central Texas. We live on 12 acres, and we have 5 cows, 3 of which are dairy cows, 8 pigs that are pasture raised, and we sell meat for pork, and a little over 100 chickens. Some are chicks, we're raising them up right now, and then some are full-grown chickens. We also have 2 guardian livestock dogs that really do a lot of sleeping and barking, as evidenced by this picture. And we also just started raising turkeys for Thanksgiving this year, so that was kind of a new fun experience. So this is a little bit about our ranch. The reason there is so much going on is because each animal has a purpose and a job. And while they're all super fun and super cute, they also do serve really important purpose on the ranch itself. So that's why I like to call them out and give them a little bit of a shout out. So when we're talking about farmland in the US, there's 895 million acres of farmland as of 2021. This number has declined I mean, I would say relatively drastically, because in 2014, the number of acres of farmland was 950 million. And so farmland is declining, just acreage in general is declining. And this is a lot has to do with industrialization. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the farmland, some of the farmland is no longer usable because it's been overfarmed. Out of those 895 million acres, there's 389.7 million acres used for crops. And over 50% of those crops are corn and soybean. So in the US, those are the two most produced crops that we utilize. And some of that is, well, most of it is utilized in the US for a bunch of different things that I'm going to go into in a second, but 15% of it is exported. And of all of that cropland, that makes up about 2 million, a little over 2 million farms and ranches as of 2021. So there's about 2 million farms and ranches across the US that's making up all of this farmland. And that number is actually steadily decreasing over the course of the past 20 years. So it's not a great thing, but it is happening, and it's just more so because farming is a dying profession. The older generation of farmers are the ones that are producing a lot of the corn and soy, and they are not passing those things on to their next of kin. They just, a lot of people don't want to take it on for financial reasons, for moral reasons, for a whole host of different reasons. So like I mentioned earlier, the top crops harvested are corn and soy. They make up over 50%. Most of the corn crop is used domestically as a main ingredient in livestock feed and ethanol fuel production. So just so we're clear here, we're taking or using farmland to grow something that needs to be processed into food for livestock instead of letting them eat grass, which is kind of backwards to me. Other uses for the corn that we produce, and this also is for soy, is used in sweeteners, oils, and beverage and industrial alcohols. And like I said earlier, corn exports account for 15% of US usage, and it's currently rising year over year. So why does this matter? Because that's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of information, but it just kind of sounds kind of abstract, right? So here's some of the reasons that this matters so much is because of over farming, with a focus placed primarily on output of monoculture crops. And those are corn, soybean, wheat, cotton too. It's led to over farming of a lot of our land. This over farming has drove up the need for the development of pesticides and chemical fertilizers to support this overproduction of monoculture crops that would outcompete with native grasses and weeds. We were talking about native grasses earlier and the importance of having native plants to those areas. And we know this with animals. If we have animals that are invasive species, it can outcompete with the species that live there currently, the native species, and it can kill off entire populations. And that's what happens when we have these pesticide-proof crops that come in. They outcompete the native grasses and weeds, and it ends up killing off entire species. And that's really, really detrimental to the land itself. And this over farming is clearing out and destroying a lot of habitats. Clearing out pastures to plant monoculture crops destroys the habitat of birds, bees, butterflies, other critters that no longer have forage or safety, and it creates an imbalance in the ecosystem. The same way how competing the grasses can kill off species that way. We need all of these species in a balance in order for the ecosystem to thrive. And so what happens is if we're over clearing, we're destroying these habitats, we're killing off these smaller species that thrive in those ecosystems, then it creates more of an imbalance. It creates more of a need essentially for more chemicals and pesticides to continue growing in that area. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that goes on and on and on. So what is regenerative agriculture? It's a holistic approach to agriculture that focuses on the interconnection of farming systems and the ecological system just as a whole. And these are some of the principles. Keeping soil covered, which is, if you think about it, the complete opposite of a monoculture crop plan. They want to keep the ground as dry as possible. You want to spray as much as possible. Maintaining a living root year round. Another thing that is completely contradictory to the current farming system, because what they do every season, every harvest season, is they'll go in and take out everything that's been harvested and then till that land up, kill all of those roots, and then start over again the next year. In a regenerative system, maintaining a living root year round is really, really important because that's what helps solidify the ecosystem under the soil. Minimizing soil disturbance instead of using really heavy machinery to go in and till up the ground and really like cause a ton of disturbance to the soil. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it. One of those is integrating livestock. And I'm going to go into in a little bit the like jobs that different livestock have, because it's actually really, really fascinating, and it's really it seems like a no-brainer to utilize this kind of method of agriculture instead of the current or more popular system right now. And maximizing crop diversity. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you want to make sure that you are maintaining the ecosystem of that area. There is no area where you will find in nature, if it's been untouched, you won't find anywhere where there's just one plant species. Everywhere has a wide variety of different crops and different grasses and plants that grow in that ecosystem. And the reason is because each of them serves a different purpose. They each have, they pull different nutrients into the soil. They feed different animals. They have so many different purposes that it's super, super cool. How does this affect our food or the ground or anything really? Keeping soil covered and plants living gives us much richer biodiversity in the soil itself. And so that biodiversity gives us the ability to maintain a better mineral content, provide more nutrients to the plants that grow there. If you have recently heard any recommendation for supplementing magnesium, this is a really big reason. A lot of our farmland is so over farmed that even if you're eating dark leafy greens, which is like the highest source of magnesium in nature, you're not getting a lot of those nutrients. And the reason is because our soil is so depleted of those nutrients that it's not pulling into the plant itself. So you would have to eat so much more of it to get the same amount. So that's why we end up supplementing with magnesium. And that's the case for a lot of different nutrients and foods. It's not just magnesium and dark leafy greens, but that's the best example. Integrating livestock. Ruminant animals are best designed to digest and break down nutrients in grasses and cover crops. And bonus, as ruminants graze, they leave behind nutrient-dense manure to decompose and return back to the soil. And they spread seeds as they rub against plants, and they plant them, like physically plant the seeds with their spade-shaped hooves as they walk around. Cows, especially, are like the coolest animal. They're not very smart. However, what they do just naturally by living is super, super cool. They basically, what I just said is that they poop, and their poop is really nutrient dense, and that decomposes and goes back into the soil and returns some nutrients back into the soil, which is super important. They also love to scratch against things. So like they'll rub their backs against different plants and trees, and that shakes the plant, releasing the seeds. And then as they're walking around and they're grazing throughout the pasture that they're grazing in, their hooves have this they look like this. So the two top pieces are like a spade. And if you think about it, that's digging into the ground with every step that they take. And so what that's doing is it's pushing into the ground plant matter, it's pushing into the ground any other type of organic matter, and it basically is planting the seeds. So you really don't have to do very much. So it's super cool. And it just is fascinating to me that this is how Earth evolved. Like, these animals are meant to do this. And so there's no additional work that has to be done for them to do it. So super cool. Love livestock. And then maintaining crop diversity. Diversity of crops brings diversity of nutrients, like I mentioned earlier, and it allows the soil to maintain healthy levels of nitrogen, carbon, and more. So we actually need nitrogen, we need carbon in the soil itself in order to have healthy soil that can yield healthy plant matter. With this type of system, you are giving a lot more ability to the soil and the plants themselves to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and bring it back into the soil, which is huge. The other piece of this that is a fun fact, a lot of weeds will pop up because they are the type of plants that will pull nitrogen back into the soil. And so if you're noticing a ton of weed problems, then usually it is more of a soil depletion of nitrogen than it is that the weeds are just trying to be pesky and annoying. They actually everything serves a purpose. And if you think about the natural world, everything has a purpose, and that's super, super cool. So what role do animals play in a regenerative model? In terms of ruminant animals, so this is one of our cows, but this is a perfect example. Grazing, they manage overgrowth this way. So cows can be picky, but they will go into a pasture and they will eat down the grass themselves. What they're also doing is compacting the grass, because everywhere they go, they're laying down, they're rolling around, they're walking through the grass. So they're usually creating a ton of impact in that area. And like I said, they're spreading seeds as they rub on things, as they step into the soil. So they are really, really great at grazing, managing overgrowth, and compacting and spreading seeds. Pigs are super cool. So not commercial breed pigs, but if you think of heritage breed pigs, they actually are meant to forage. They eat a ton of grasses, they eat a ton of bugs. They love, and I mean love, turning over soil, breaking things up. They love being destructive. They're just so curious. And so pigs are really great in a regenerative model to turn over soil in order to make space to plant new seeds. So what we had to do on our property is, because we had a ton of overgrowth of, we had a ton of weed overgrowth because it had previously been neglected, the land. And so there were a ton of things that were just really overgrown. So we had cleared out a tree area and let all of whatever grasses were going to grow there grow over the last year. And then we ran some pigs in the back of our property, and they, have a fence set up, and so they can stay within this fence line, but they had kind of free range of maybe an acre of space. And what they did over the course of a couple of weeks is they turned everything over. So this super green grassy area turned into super, it actually looks terrifying when you first look at it, but it's just barren now. And the good thing is that what that does is it allows us to go in and plant the cover crops for seeds that are native to this area. And then as it rains and as the seeds are impacted into the soil, it will grow new grasses back. And so this is a process that we do throughout the ranch with the pigs. We rotate them to different areas that we want to regenerate. And they do the work of turning over the soil, pulling out some of the weeds, eating some of the things that are not necessarily advantageous there. And then we go in when they move to another area and then plant new seeds in that area. And then chickens, this is a bad example because they're in front of our house, but chickens are really great at fertilizing and spreading fertilizer. So their poop is super nitrogen rich, which enriches the soil. So if you have chickens, it's great because then you can actually use their manure instead of letting the weeds grow and kind of work themselves out, because it's super nitrogen rich. So that's super cool. The other thing that chickens do, which is kind of gross, but also very fascinating to me, is they will go and spread around the poop of cows looking for things. So they're looking for bugs, they're looking for seeds that maybe haven't been digested. They're looking for all sorts of things in the manure of cows. And what that does, as they spread it out, it's spreading the manure around a bigger area. So it allows more of it to decompose into the earth, which is just so cool. So I want to make a transition now from why the regenerative piece is so important to how this affects us and our food, because they are very closely tied, but sometimes it may not feel that way. So these are some fun facts about pasture-raised meat in general. It is lower in saturated fat and cholesterol. Pasture-raised beef is lower in saturated fat and cholesterol than conventionally raised beef. This is also true in pasture-raised dairy, so milk. This is one of those things where, like, does grass-fed count? Does grass-finished count? They do, in fact. Like, if you look for grass-fed, grass-finished beef, it will also have a lower saturated fat and cholesterol content than conventionally grain-fed beef. It is high in phytochemicals, so there's more antioxidants because they're eating more plant matter. So the antioxidants that are more frequently found in plants are also higher in pastured ruminants. And ruminants include sheep, goats, and cows. So that's just a fun fact for you. And these are the only animals, like ruminant animals are the only animals that can eat some ground cover in the US and worldwide. There's over 200,000 plant species on Earth, and humans can only eat a few thousand of them. And only a few hundred of those plants have actually been domesticated to the point where we would eat them. So out of those few hundred, only a dozen account for over 80% of the production of current annual crops. So there's not a lot of usable land. There's areas in the US where there's actually not usable land that we can even grow something on. And that's why this is important, because if you think about all of this land that we have that can't be developed because, you know, maybe it's on mountainsides, or it can't be used as farmland because the crops won't grow there. The only other option is to run animals there. And so pasture-raised meat is really important because this is area of our land that can be managed and can be improved upon by bringing some native species back into that area. And some more fun facts, because I love fun facts. This is more kind of about pork now and poultry, but pasture-raised pork is lower in omega-6 fatty acids, making the ratio closer to 5:1 omega-6 to omega-3, as compared to 13:1 omega-6 to omega-3 in conventional or grain-fed pork. This is really, really important because with beef, I'm going to talk about this in a second in more detail, but with beef, with cows, they are typically raised grass-fed. because it's easier to raise cows grass-fed. So you let them out on pasture, and then whoever owns those cows will sell them to essentially a feedlot to finish them, which is kind of sad. And then they're grain finished. Pigs, traditionally in the conventional model, are grain fed their entire lives. And that is an issue because that is just a bigger accumulation of a ton of toxins, because pigs are monogastric. They have one stomach. They're really, really bad at detoxing everything. So they have a higher fat content. So they're going to store a ton of toxins in their fat. And then we eat that. And that's a problem. There's also a lower, actually, most of the time, minimal exposure to antibiotics. They're used most often in concentrated animal feeding operations because animals are kept in such confined areas that they a lot more it's like a breeding ground for bacteria. So living on pasture, there's less opportunity for bacteria to grow and infections to develop, which reduces and basically eliminates the need for antibiotics. I'm not going to say that pasture raised animals never have antibiotics, because it is possible. It's always possible that something could happen. They could get, they could get scratched by something and it could potentially get infected, and they may need antibiotics early in their life, something like that. But the routine use of antibiotics, the preventative use for antibiotics in feeding animals drastically reduces when you focus on pasture raised over the conventional model. And then it has a greater nutrient density. Pasture-raised poultry can have up to 50% more of the vitamins A, D, and E, and about 20% less saturated fat. If you've ever looked at traditional conventionally raised poultry, so chicken, in the grocery store versus pasture-raised poultry, maybe from the farmer's market, the meat looks completely different itself. So conventionally raised chicken that's not free range, essentially, it will be like lighter color, kind of white, kind of pasty, and pasture raised poultry will be a little bit darker, a little bit richer color. Sometimes it can be almost like pink or brown, and that's just because it has so many more nutrients in it than the grocery store option. So some people are turned off by that, but that actually is a good sign if it's a darker color. So this is a big question, and this is something that I think I struggled with a lot as I started to learn more about food quality, and even as I went through my nutritional therapy certification and just that education, because it's really, really easy to get wrapped up in, well, this is the best thing for everybody, and so everybody should do it. Problem is that it may not be feasible, and then that creates a bigger barrier for our clients, the people we're trying to serve. So let's look at it a little bit more, maybe with a wider view. Ruminant animals have complex digestive tracts. They're able to turn inedible forage for humans into an edible protein source. Like I said earlier, most cows are raised on pasture for the majority of their lives and then finished with either grass, they would be grass-fed, grass-finished, or grain, which would be not 100% grass-fed. For these reasons specifically, beef, goat, and lamb would still be an impactful protein option, whether or not it's pasture-raised, grass-finished. It doesn't have to be we don't have to be as stringent with beef. It will still have a ton of nutrients. Cows just naturally are able to turn a lot of things into edible forms of food for us. And that includes filtering out a lot of like the pesticides and chemical fertilizers if they are eating any of those things as well. So short to long answer is it's not pasture raised or bust for ruminant animals specifically. For monogastric animals like chicken and pork, they build up more toxins in their body as they're raised in confinement. And that's the issue there. So these may be better options for you to splurge on for pasture raised or at least organic, so that you're not getting a lot of the additional chemicals and pesticides if it's a possibility. And so when we think about how we can support our clients or patients in recommendations for food quality specifically, the base of that pyramid really should focus on getting a wide variety of whole foods, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. This is like the foundation, right? We talk about foundations all the time. We really want to make sure that our patients or clients are getting a wide variety of whole foods first, before we get into the weeds with like the quality of those whole foods. Sometimes that change in itself can make a huge impact for their health. Above that is getting or buying organic produce and meat when possible. If you've got the foundation down, you're getting the whole foods, and you want to take a step up from there, and you think that, maybe I can start to buy some things organic. Maybe there are some things that are worth buying organic. The Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 is a great resource from the Environmental Working Group for produce. And then meat, I always recommend going to a farmer's market or looking for organic on the label in the grocery store. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be, like the happiest cow or the happiest pig, but it is going to be just a little bit healthier for you, a little bit more nutrient dense, a little bit less potential toxins in that system. A step up from there would be grass-fed, cage-free animal proteins and products. So we're getting a little bit more specific. We're also narrowing it down a little bit here. So grass-fed and cage-free, if we're thinking about cage-free would be chickens or other poultry. And then grass-fed would be your beef or other ruminants. So lamb, sheep, lamb, goats, anything of those types of animals. And then getting to the pinnacle of that pyramid would be pasture-raised animal proteins and products. If you can, when you can, try it. See how it goes for you. These are some things that I think that we get a little bit wrapped up in. So does it have to be pasture-raised all the time? No, and it's not necessarily feasible for a lot of people. So this is kind of the way that I like to think about it, is build the base. And then if you can start to add these additional layers of complexity to their nutrition, amazing. They'll definitely benefit the, more steps that they can take. I wanted to share some additional resources here for you. There is a ton of information on the Savory Institute website on regenerative agriculture, as well as some really, really cool brands that are partnering with ranches and farms that are producing, higher quality meat, but also ways that you can utilize the whole animal nose to tail. So like Timberland, these are companies that are working with regenerative ranches to use the hides for leather and all different pieces of the animal so that there's nothing that's going to waste. And that's really, really powerful. Kiss the Ground is one of the documentaries that literally pushed us to want to own our own regenerative ranch. So I always highly recommend it. I don't know that that will be the outcome for everybody, but you may enjoy it anyway. It's narrated by Woody Harrelson. It's very entertaining. Sacred Cow is another really great resource. There is a great documentary. There's also a book. It's written by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf. And then the Food Animal Concerns Trust is another great resource to learn more about regenerative agriculture and the impact it has on animal welfare and then also on the environment. And then White Oak Pastures and Rep Provisions are two of my favorite and most often recommended ranches to check out if there's nothing local to you. So if you want to know of ranches and farms that are local to you that have regenerative practices in mind or organic practices in mind, then you can check out eatwild.com. And I'll put that actually in the chat box.
Yeah, I was laughing, Arielle. Megan had just had sent in a question asking for resources.
Oh,
books.
amazing.
That was your next slide.
Perfect. I just read your mind, Megan. I knew it. Eatwild.com is the last one, and that is an interactive database where you can find farms and ranches in your area that are practicing organic practices and regenerative practices. So that is highly, highly recommended. I'm laughing at Abby's comment. Anyone want to start a commune? Yes. Everyone can move here if you want. So that is it in terms of resources. These are some of the sources that I used. So I'll share the slides so that you have this information if you want to look through any of the data or statistics, anything like that. I'm happy for you to do so. And I'm going to go back to this slide so that you can have the links to all these great things. Do we have any big questions? Anything that you were like, wait, what? Is anybody looking at cows differently now? They're my favorite.
I like the cow hoof spade.
It's so cool. And when you like watch them, like sometimes now, because it was really, really hot over the summer, so the ground was a little bit firmer, so they weren't making as much of an impact. But now that we've gotten a little bit of rain, you can watch them walk and you see the trail of where their hooves are, and you literally see the little divots that they make in the ground, and it's so cool.
Yeah. Do you guys use any composting or anything there? I know they do at the farm here in Kentucky.
Yeah, we haven't had a ton of luck with compost here, but the good thing is the reason that we haven't had luck with it is because we did an open compost pile and our chickens and our dogs just destroyed it. So they like took everything out of it. So we have to redesign our compost pile for this next year. But the good thing is that because the cows, we rotate everyone into each pasture, all of the land itself is getting fertilized. So we haven't had to use it. The compost bin that we have was more for our garden, which with the drought in Texas, it died anyway. So kind of sad.
Yeah.
Sad ending of the year, but that's good.
Let's see what's in.
Yeah, let's see here. Shook that you only interacted with cows in the 3rd grade. Yeah, I literally I think I touched a cow's udder and I was like, not for me. And then now we have like 3 dairy cows. So very much for me now.
Garrett had asked how many people you need to maintain it.
So right now it is really just my husband and I, and then his dad helps out a lot. And my mom helps out sometimes. So I would say about 4 of us. I will say that it's really, really helpful that we both work from home, because if something, like needs to be refilled, like someone's water or something like that, there's some leeway of like, I have 5 minutes, I can go, do X, Y, or Z. I will say that our weekends are very much taken up by farm projects. So if we wanted, a little bit more freedom in that respect, we probably would need to have 1 or 2 people to help us maintain the ranch itself.
And then he had a follow-up. Yeah, I was gonna say he had a follow-up on that. I don't know if you ever chat up just how much production.
Yeah. So in terms of supporting with what we raise, we currently raise pork for meat and we sell it at the farmer's market. So if we didn't sell it at the farmer's market, we would have enough meat for probably like 2 or 3 years at a time. So we do have enough as we raise animals. Like we have enough chickens to have eggs for ourselves and our family, which my parents live here and my husband's parents moved here too. So we have enough like eggs to feed them. We, except for the summer, always have a cow in milk. So we always have, milk that we can utilize as well for things like drinking, and then cheese, and sometimes we supplement the pigs with that as well. So there's a good amount here to support us if we didn't want to sell the meat at the farmer's market, which I love going to the farmer's market. So I enjoy that part. And then I saw, what are the steps you took to purchase and run your own ranch? So that's a really great question. We really just did a lot of research on how much land we would need to do some sort of a small scale operation of regenerative farming. And I knew, like I had said earlier, like I knew I wanted space. So I knew I wanted to live on more than like 5 acres. So this was kind of like the sweet spot. We're on 12 now. We really looked for like between 8 and 15 acres. And then aside from looking at like how much land we wanted, some other things that I would recommend looking into are like, what is the climate in the area that you're in? Because that's something that's really helpful to just know so that you can prepare for whether or not you need to have certain things like a rainwater catch system for, the summer, which we didn't have this summer. And it really did. It was tough for a lot of the animals because it was so dry that we had to get hay, which we never usually need to do. And we had to put out sprinklers for the pigs to keep them cool. There's a lot of additional things that we needed to think about. So I think understanding the climate in the area that you're in is really important. And then we really looked for someplace that we could live and run something. So it was really like we purchased a house with a lot of land, and then that's what we turned into kind of the working ranch itself. And my autoimmune conditions did improve significantly. Recently, as of like last year, I don't think that I noticed any really big symptoms at all, which is huge. I would get like, as I was starting to heal, I would randomly get hives just out of nowhere. And that has tremendously stopped or slowed down. Like now I think I only got hives once in the past, like probably 2 years. And I was like very run down, really stressed. And so I knew exactly kind of why that was coming back up for me. But yes, my autoimmune conditions drastically improved. And I thought it was interesting because I'm now constantly faced with significantly more germs and bacteria than I was previously, even living in the city. And we lived all over, but I just think that there's something to be said about being outside. Like I have to be outside every day. There's no days that I can't be. So I think that helps a ton.
Thank you so much, Arielle. I am dying to come visit your ranch. It's so cool.
Everybody can come visit. Maybe not at one time. I don't think I can house everyone at once, but everybody's always welcome.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Sure.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
we'll put up tents down there and do it summit style.
Yes.
Perfect. Done.
Love it. Well, thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Of course. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you're a Wild Health patient, you might not know, but you have access to our referral program. This gets your friends and family 25% off Wild Health services. Just head to Clarity, and in the top right corner, you'll see Refer a Friend. Click there, and you'll be brought to a page with your referral code. Happy sharing.